NRA TV with Colion Noir.
What's going on, folks? It's Colion Noir for another episode of Seeing Live. And joining me live today is Kimberly Corban. Now, is it Corban? I'm going to say Corban because I'm a gun guy, so initially my mind's going to go Corban ammunition. Is it Corban?
I might need to change to that now. It's Corban.
Corban, gotcha. Awesome. So, all right, let's jump right into it. So kind of talk us through your initial journey into the gun world.
I am not here thinking that this is where I would have been if you would have asked me at 20 years old. But I grew up in Greeley, Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. And when I was a student at the University of Northern Colorado, a stranger broke into my college area apartment, held me in my room for 2 hours, and sexually assaulted me. I immediately reported the rape once I survived. And about 3 weeks later, the police department here caught him. We went through the entire trial process, and as I'm suffering from PTSD, depression, having to drop out of school, all of these effects that were directly related to this crime, I started thinking, why did this have to happen to me?
Yeah.
And so I made the choice to release my name to the media. That is not something that the media typically practices, as it's a very, very personal crime. But I decided if I could just help one person not have to experience what I did, then that would be worth it. Yeah. And it has taken me on an incredible journey. And I started speaking out about my assault and answering questions and just giving people a very real feeling for the trauma that affects crime victims. And in 2013, I was a grad student at UNC studying criminal justice. I had chosen to carry to protect myself because that's allowed on college campuses. And our senators and representatives were looking to pass an expansive gun control package. We were kind of the litmus test for the rest of the nation. And that was my first foray into anything in the Second Amendment world. I was completely blindsided, but it absolutely blew up because I'm telling my very personal story about why I choose to own a firearm, because it was not something I ever wanted anything to do with beforehand. And it's just kind of taken off from there. So when I speak about my Second Amendment rights, your Second Amendment rights, the Constitution, just personal accountability, it's from a place of knowing what it feels like to have none of that, and for having all of my free will and my independence and my ability to say yes or no taken away from me. And that is far too precious to protect for myself and my kids. So that's really where this has come from. And I think it's resonating with a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen the effects of it. How hard has it been to, because I'm pretty sure the idea of going into detail about what has happened, because I'm going to assume in many ways it forces you to almost kind of relive it to a certain degree each time you tell it. How hard was that? How hard of a decision was that for you to make in terms of saying, you know what, I'm going to use my story, as hard as it is to talk about, and use to help other people?
I don't think I quite knew what I was getting into when I first did it. Only because there is such a shame and a guilt associated with sexual assault that is completely out of the ordinary for every other crime. And so for me to decide, I have no reason to be shameful of this. I have no reason to feel guilty. I didn't do anything, nor does any victim. My ability to separate those two and use my voice until people could find their own was a choice that I made deliberately. But having known some of the questions that I would get asked afterwards, it was almost like a use of therapy. Because if somebody asked me a question after I had given my speech and I'm like, ooh, I don't feel comfortable answering that, then I knew that I needed to work on that with my counselor, because no part of this story has anything to do with choosing to be a victim, because no one chooses to be a victim, but you can choose how you end that story and how you become a survivor. And so that's exactly what I have practiced now for just last year, 11 years, or I'm sorry, just last month. Just last week. What day is it? We just had this
we just had this conversation, right? We think it's October. It's like, right? It's like November 27th or something.
So last Friday was actually the 11th anniversary. So I have been now doing this for 10 years that I've had my name released.
That's awesome. Now, I'm pretty sure there are some people out there who would think, what do you think caused you to go that direction? Because there were a number of directions you could have gone. You could have just as very easily gone the anti-gun route, because they use that rhetoric also to push more gun control. While at the same, but then you went the other direction and looked at it from a more pro-gun standpoint. Why do you think that was?
I don't want to discount how hard it is to talk about this. I have done an extensive amount of counseling, of therapy, of EMDR, and it is still very, very difficult and draining. And so each time that I tell that story, there's a sense of personal accountability that comes with that. And I don't know whether or not you knew this, but I actually voted for President Obama right after my victimization, because here it is, 2008 presidential election. I was assaulted in 2006, and I'm getting involved with all of these advocacy groups that are telling me this is the hope and change that we need. Yeah. I have a better chance of getting maybe pro-victim legislation passed if he's the president. Well, when push came to shove and I'm looking at my individual rights and taking accountability myself, then those Democrats that were pandering for my vote were nowhere to be seen. So I really look at this as something that I had to learn the hard way, but it comes down to being on the phone with somebody and asking for help, or being able to help myself. And I don't carry because I know, or because I fear what's going to happen. I carry because I already know, and I don't want other people to have to know that same fear.
Yeah. Now, what would you, have you ever gotten a question of, okay, well, how do you feel a gun would have helped you in your particular situation? Is that a question that you ever come across before?
All the time. So when I did the CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper and President Obama, that was the anti-gun left's biggest thing was, well, it wouldn't even helped you because, you were woken up in the middle of the night. Okay, like let's take this apart piece by piece. Yeah. I can't do anything about that assault that happened, but I surely can do something to make sure that that's one more tool in my toolbox should that ever arise again. And just because it couldn't prevent one situation doesn't mean that you take that option away from everybody else, because there are those situations that it can help and it can prevent.
Absolutely. And I know I've had my own personal accounts, my own experiences with respect to something that was very similar to what happened to you, not personally, but someone I know. And that was always a question that was brought up, the idea of how was it going to affect that situation. And I always found it an odd question, because it seemingly relegated to any type of vulnerability or any way that you could possibly be attacked would be this exact situation and only this situation. Right. And I kind of looked at it as more as an awakening. And tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. As more of an awakening to understanding your vulnerabilities and then wanting to empower yourself to guard against those vulnerabilities if somebody decided to take advantage of them.
That's exactly it. And really, this is the crux of victim blaming. Well, if you would have had a gun, it would have been used on you, or why would you want one? It's going to be used against you or taken away from you. And that's not the case here, because we are looking to be trained. We are looking to be ready. Yeah. My awareness level alone after having this happen to me has gone through the roof. And it's not that I live in fear. It's that I'm prepared, and don't take that option away from me to be better prepared than the person that's attacking me.
Absolutely. It's always a delicate balance in utilizing real-world scenarios to establish a point of rhetoric. Because whether we want to believe it or not, both sides, we're all engaging in a level of rhetoric. It's a matter of we just believe ours is right. And I know it to be right, actually. But, when you were dealing with some of the victim groups, was there a point where you felt, so for instance, I like to use a lot of anecdotal stories to kind of communicate my point. And, I bring up certain people, and I'm very careful not to just exploit the situation for, this happened to you, this is great, you proved my point, let's go, throw you up there, I'm going to use you as an example.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
How did that feel in terms of, feeling like, okay, I'm nothing, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, and I'm not going to make assumptions on their behalf because you experienced it. So was there ever a point where you felt like you were just kind of a rhetorical commodity instead of a real life type of, basically like a real person who went through a traumatic experience?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And here's the shocking part. I've gotten that from both sides. I want people to know my story. And I don't care if they remember my name or my face. I've never done this for me. It's to help other people. So the more people that hear that are educated about it, the better. But when you take a story like mine, take a story like my friend Christy McMains, who saved her own life with a firearm just last year in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
My friend Amanda Collins, who was raped at gunpoint in Nevada. The three of us talk constantly, and it is always a conversation about the ownership over our story and the ability to express ourselves and share these opinions as opposed to just being used.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want to do. We want to be able to voice our opinions and fight for our rights, because that's exactly why we did this in the first place. But it's from both sides. And when you do this on a national level, because I never did before, suddenly it's the craziest people in the farthest reaches of their parents' basement that are becoming keyboard warriors. And that's when you get your story really used.
Yeah.
But I have to say, with all my work in victim advocacy in Colorado, those groups were and continue to be fabulous, because there needs to be some kind of central thesis between the two, because here I am wanting to protect myself. They're wanting to prevent crimes. This needs to be working together a little bit more than it does when we get partisanship and politics involved in it.
Yeah. And so I think you touched on it a little bit, not a couple minutes ago. You know, when you came out more pro-gun, did you find, was there a certain level of alienation on behalf of other organizations? I guess I'm talking, Mr. Euphemism over here, right? But before you answer that question, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick it up from there.